Good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to the Mumbai Angels Network's Reboot 2 Industry Edition, a series of events focused on the challenges and opportunities for specific sectors in the new normal. Before we begin, I request all of you to please keep your devices on mute to ensure you can hear the speakers clearly and participate better. The session is divided into 40 minutes of panel discussion and 20 minutes of Q&A. Do send us your questions during the chat. Our team will curate them and we'll try to get them answered by our esteemed panelists. Our sector and focus for today is supply chain. I would like to acknowledge our sponsors and partners for today's session. Event partner, Ideal Insurance Brokers, taxation partner, Tax Mantra Global, supply chain and logistics partner, Hedge. Our panelists for today are Akshay Hegde, co-founder and managing director, Shakeel, a supply chain guy turned entrepreneur who's passionate about building tech products with disruptive potential and high impact for the B2B domain. He graduated magna cum laude in industrial engineering from Purdue University. As a consultant at Maybach Consulting USA, he acquired demonstrated expertise in distribution, warehousing, logistics, and network optimization across projects in the apparel, industrial, and FMCG sector. Our next panelist for today is Antony Prashant, partner at Deloitte. Antony has over 16 years of consulting and industry experience. His areas of expertise include managing large supply chain transformation projects, focusing on supply chain strategy, network optimization, value chain optimization, and integrated pull and flow concepts. His recent initiatives involve conceptualizing digital interventions from a manufacturing perspective, covering both pharmaceuticals and consumer businesses, focusing on cost optimization and productivity improvement. Our next panelist for today, Raghav Narsalay, is the Managing Director at Accenture Research. Raghav is a global research lead for Accenture's Business Industry X.0, 10.0, which helps companies to build new market experiences and enhance efficiencies by embedding digital technologies in their supply chains, operations, and offerings. Raghav's research in the field of technology-driven innovation and operating models is published in prestigious Tier 1 publications such as Harvard Business Review, Stanford Social Innovation Review, and European Business Review, amongst others. In 2013, the Academy for Innovation and Entrepreneurship Conference at Oxford awarded a special mention for pioneering contributions to Raghav's work around inclusive business models. The session for today will be moderated by Dr. Rakesh Singh, Chairman, Institute of Supply Chain Management. Dr. Rakesh Singh is the Chairman and Dean of ISCM Demand Planning Academy and SCM Pro Knowledge Mumbai. He is a global thought leader, author, researcher, and consultant. He has a PhD in demand planning. He brings a contrarian perspective while interpreting signals along the supply chain. He integrates geopolitical developments and macroeconomic shifts to understand shifting business ecosystems. I take this opportunity to thank our panelists for their time and giving us and our audience this opportunity to learn from their experience and insights. Without taking more of your time, over to you, Dr. Rakesh.
Shivangi, Dr. Rakesh is facing some technical issue. He joined in and he went back. So I would suggest if we can initiate the discussion, and very soon he'll be joining us.
Sure. So while we're waiting for our moderator to log in, I would request the panelists to spend a minute, 2 minutes giving their insights on the overall situation and the challenges and opportunities that are currently present in the supply chain, and then we can move to the discussion.
Sure. So if I were to go first, I'd probably start by saying that it's I feel like it's a golden opportunity for India because there's a lot of I guess pent up anger against China after the trade war, and then this COVID. A lot of companies are trying to get out of China, which is a known fact. Japan has also basically allotted a certain amount of funds to help companies. I think it was somewhere close to 2 billion, but to get their companies out of China. I have a feeling that India might be best suited for taking the mantle from China for global supply chain, from becoming the center of global supply chains. It's not easy unless we're able to make policy that it's more conducive to these companies coming in. And I believe that it's going to be a long, drawn out uh, recovery. It's not so easy for us to like just bounce back. If you look at the estimates that Goldman Sachs has come out with, it's already claiming that this quarter was down by 45%, and they're talking about FY21 being down by another 5%. The GDP growth rate, which is the lowest India has ever seen in the past 30 years. So it's going to be a different challenge on that front as well, making demand pick up.
Yeah, thanks, Akshay. I think one of the biggest lessons that COVID has taught us is we've always been focused, the supply chains have always been focusing on efficiency and cost. We've always been looking at cost as an arbitrage. But today, what it has taught us is we have to move away from cost arbitrage to a disruption arbitrage scenario. Are we going to look at facing disruptions? Or are we looking at building inefficiencies on cost? So it's actually changed the way the businesses have to be looked at, especially building in resilience in the supply chain, both whether it's from a demand side or whether it's from a building in capacities or building in what's the supply basis that you need to look at. So that's one big lesson that's taught us. It's not only for India but globally as well. When Akshay did mention about our dependencies on China, and if you look at some of the big imports that come in from China, we may not be a large exporter of that as well. Or where China is exporting these products into other countries, we may not be a large exporter on those as well. I mean, if you take pharma, for example, China is the world's largest exporter of APIs, but we import significantly, I wouldn't say the APIs, but at least the intermediates from China. And this gives us a big opportunity for us to relook at what supply chains in India can look at. Where it is in two folds: India for India, you build in resilience for India, and also now opportunity for us to look at India for global. Because what's the opportunity which we have been missing today, and how can we cater to that? So it gives a lot of push, especially for the manufacturing sectors, how to build capacities in India for India and India for global. So that's something I think many sectors would start focusing on.
Hi, this is Raghav here. So I think from my perspective, can somebody go on mute, please? Because somebody's not on mute. I'm hearing a huge echo here. So I think from my perspective, what this crisis has really shown is that supply chain is about humans. It's it's a very, very human-centric function. Depends a lot on human beings and their ingenuity to work with technology. And I think this human face of supply chain is actually the real face of supply chain, which probably was somewhere kind of getting lost. And I believe companies that have really bounced back, that have really done well, are the ones who are really seeing supply chains as a network of humans and machines. Companies that are really who are getting valued more on the stock markets are the ones that are not only displaying resilience, but that are displaying responsibility to their workforce at the same time. And I think this is a very new phase of business that is now, I would say, coming in front of people. It's an absolutely welcome, responsible, resilient, kind of posture, which is, according to me, going to be a very defining feature of future business. So while business has always, been focusing on customer relevance, using technologies to drive customer relevance for, the past, 5 to 6 years, especially, after digital has come into vogue, I think with this crisis, businesses are now clearly understanding that, you know, supply chains, or for that matter, value chains, whatever you want to call them, are actually about people. They are very human, and humans need to be valued. And the crisis is a very human crisis, and therefore, it will need a human solution. And I think this is a very, very defining feature of this crisis. And companies who have understood this well are actually, or have actually started doing well, is what my research kind of shows. So that's my first initial set of thoughts. Thank you.
So I think we have Dr. Rakesh Singh here. So we just started with an initial minute, 2 minute insight from all the panelists. If you would like to give yours, and then we can take the discussion forward. You're on mute, Dr. Rakesh. If you could unmute your microphone.
Now I can be heard, right?
Yes.
Hi, everybody. I heard Raghav and a bit of Prashant. I missed you out, Akshay. I think Raghav is right that crisis is more human. And, it is all kind of businesses should have always been human, right? If you see the global trend that you have in ESG compliance that businesses needs to do, that's environmental, social, and governance. And I think all these get missed. But to add to the three panelists, I would say this is a crisis which essentially has, from a very strong risk perspective, both a inside vulnerability as far as the organizations are concerned, and an outside exposure to some pandemics like this. And we have seen in last 15 years a number of such kind of disruptions, natural disasters, which has been not actually taken heed of, and businesses have been doing business as far as the external exposure is concerned in a normal way. Every time you have a crisis, you come back to the normal, and then you go and you create a vulnerable supply chain, something which is more of a firefighting than it is either competitive or it is resilient or either human. So I think this is a great opportunity despite the suffering that we go through. It has this, human and very concerning part of it, but it also may provide in future to value human, value business processes, and value partners. Because even in human, one thing which practitioners may agree is that businesses have been totally transactional in relation, and largely supply chain functions have been transactional, driven by largely marketing needs of the organization, where our partners, external partners like supplier and distributor, has been treated largely transactionally rather than relationally. And hence there are a lot of human element that goes there also. And hence businesses have been affected in terms of efficiency, in terms of visibility, in terms of agility. And when a pandemic comes, I think one element that misses is that where is my raw material? Where is my demand? Where do I produce? And I think there's, blind spots within the businesses and with partners can create a big, big challenge that has been happening over the supply chain. So this pandemic has added value in terms of telling you that you need to be very, very resilient. And you need to move from deterministic frameworks of further.
Yes, Dr. Rakesh,
Yeah,
please.
all right. So I think though this has been a very good beginning, I did hear something about it, but let us first look at the whole dynamics of this particular pandemic. A supply shock from China, more than 190 countries being affected by it, into a very dynamic length, making it a great demand crisis. And then, the word that Raghav used, there is a very strong human crisis leading to business disruptions of an unprecedented kind, especially like, densely populated country like India. You've seen the way the migrants have been moving in patches and the pains that they go through it. And that may be one disruption that is going to be longer than we can assume. And given the nature of this pandemic in terms of incidence and the basic requirement for the virus, I think one business continuity that is going to be affected is the labor. But overall, demand and supply themselves are in direct hit. If you look at the global economy over the 1 year, I think nobody has even talked about any kind of trends that will help us to move out of it. We need to realize that demand is not an enigma. It happens because the economy moves. So in that sense of the term, I would really ask the first question to Raghav as to how the businesses have been managing this so-called, dual, triple disruption, business disruption as a whole, as well as demand and supply disruption in the first 50 days of the lockdowns within India. And what has been the trend that has actually come about, and what are lessons for, because in supply chain, one of the basic essential is that how do you plan your supply chain across this thing? How do you manage continuity of your supplies? And third, how do you see that, you serve the last mile customer?
Thank you, Dr. Singh. I think two words which quickly come to my mind, the way large businesses especially have managed their supply chains in the context of this crisis. The two words which quickly come to my mind is communication and collaboration. We really underestimate the power of communication during a crisis. In fact, crisis tends to put every human being into isolation, right? I mean, we just go into our shells. And actually, the ones who beat the crisis are the ones who come out of that shell and start talking about it openly with their partners. They start sharing their pains with their partners. They are very open about, what they're going through. And they therefore don't believe that they have the solutions for everything. But they start asking, they start really working with their partners and collaborating. And that makes me come to the second word, which is collaboration, with their partners, within their entities, for solutions. And I think this has been a very defining differentiation between those who have managed to kind of really, I wouldn't say beat the crisis. I mean, that's too early to say. But at least to, address the crisis in a manner that is far more mature and more realistic, than, what, others have. The second one is, the whole aspect of, I mean, you just mentioned the issue of, migrant labor, etc. And I think, of course, people are factoring in disruption of the workforce. People are factoring in disruption in demand. But the point is, more mature companies have already started using analytical tools to really understand what this means for their supply chain. Really coming out with proper analytical estimates in terms of what this impact is. How should they be therefore, really speaking to their suppliers about that impact, with their ecosystem partners about this impact, and what are the new measures that they should be taking so that we are in a so that these companies are in a position to focus on the exact steps that need to be taken, because you just can't take any steps, right? I mean, you really need to focus on exact steps. A simple thing, which is, if there is not going to be a demand for a certain product, then what is the raw material I should be procuring? And if my plant is, all plants are built now for scale, and which is going to be one of the biggest issues, that, people have built their plants for scaling up, but they have never built their plants for scaling down. This is an issue, now that now the companies have to scale down. And so what happens, therefore, if my plant has to therefore shut down, or if it is not to be shutting down, then how do I repurpose my plants? All happen, those who have succeeded at doing this are doing that with data. And I think those are very interesting and important steps. So one is communication. Then with communication, you have collaboration. And with collaboration, you generate the data, to take those decisive steps that will help you make the most of your resources at a given point of time. I'll just stop here.
All right. Thank you, Raghav. And you've made a very strong statement that analytical tools, but there are so many of practitioners which face an amazing amount of problems with any kind of tools that could be used in the short run. For instance, where is the data? Where is the history? And given this context that uncertainty is the biggest enemy of forecasting and analytics, I think, because analytics also, very well, is a history. It's not something which is immediate. So people have adopted various approaches in the short run, and I think they're very interesting. But before I go into those things, I will put this question to Prashant. Prashant comes from Deloitte, so you would be having some clients who have been trying to plan in the short run with a lot of fancy words that's been thrown around. So let's have a look at how companies have been planning themselves in the short run before we go into looking at the role of analytics and tech in the future of building a great resilient organization.
So, Mr. Rakesh, there are 3-4 things companies have been planning in the supply chains. One is, given the uncertainty in the short term, they have kind of eliminated forecasting as a process. Typically, we look at a 2-month forecast, a 2+1 model, then we prepare. You look at the how do I do the back end planning and all that. So what we kind of been seeing with companies is, in the short term, they are only looking at what is possible and kind of therefore eliminating the process of forecasting, and looking at therefore whether we need to buy in multiple quantities, or do we need to look at reducing the MOQs right now, even for the demand side. So companies have gone back to customers and said, can we relook at MOQs, at least in the short term? No, don't look at giving a minimum order quantity that we need to be supplying to. So they've also kind of looking towards an MOQ at the unit of 1. So even if it means, if they're able to reduce their batch sizes and look at even delivering one numbers, let's look at that. So one is they've eliminated forecast in the short term, and then they have looked at looking at their MOQs. Third thing, what most of the companies did is, they've kind of looked at this as an opportunity to eliminate orphans. For example, you have multiple alternate bombs in your company. So this is the time which they thought, let's explore our alternate bombs. Wherever I had alternate materials and being stock up in inventory, go back to customer sales and look at, while this is a bomb that we've been using, but we also had an alternate bomb where we have procured material for in a certain period which is lying as an inventory. Can we relook at in the short term exploring these alternate bombs, and therefore gives them an opportunity to liquidate inventory as well. So that's the third thing which companies have been looking at. And finally, they have reduced also the product complexity. Instead of serving multiple SKUs, they have kind of taken a call that, whenever companies which had a proliferated SKU, they said, let's not look at proliferation right now. Let's look at what is being possible to manufacture, which is what we called as constraint-based planning. Uh, with the existing material, what are SKUs that can be fulfilled? Let's focus only on that rather than trying to again cater to the larger proliferated markets. So these are 3-4 things that we've been seeing in market and what companies have been attempting as well.
Thanks, Prashant. I think that's interesting. What I have seen is that my clients, maybe the MSME plus and even this thing, there has been a large amount of focus to us. There's a planning which is hyper local, as Prashant rightly said, and this is in response to the kind of the consumer behavior which is forced on the population because of lockdown. So what has happened that essentials and close by essentials have behaved very differently, and there has been a lot of substitution of non-essential by essentials in the basket, and leading to a kind of a portfolio which is very different. What has also been seen is that different articles of different essential goods have been that the larger size, they have actually increase the size. In India, we say that, okay, you can produce a smaller pack for the bottom of the pyramid, but that whole concept has gone and a larger pack is available because it's a hoarding buy. So people have started prioritizing for commodities which were essential. People started prioritizing for bigger packs, and this consumer behavior across category has been very important in terms of category management, category buying, and also supply management. So people have largely become very, very daily oriented. The 2 months or 3 months, the rolling plan that Prashant is talking about is all into the dogs, and people are preparing for today. Yes, there is a big question at what cost. That would come out later as we are over with pandemic and people start looking at it. But yes, there is a lot of focus on the micro markets, and these micro markets have been served by what you call it as organizations in a beautiful way. They have realized that this is the way to go in the next, depending upon the incident and the length of the pandemic. Let me go back to Akshay. Akshay, you provide a very strong solution in procurement. Can you tell me, I think you spoke about China, the kind of risk that really emerged post-pandemic and post-China, COVID infections that are of significant concern to every player in the country who sources from India, because it seems that 70% of all the supplies comes from China. Estimates are varied, but if this is the dependence on a single source country, what were the problems and what do you think are future directions? We can't hear you. You have to switch on your.
Yeah, am I audible now?
Yeah.
Right. Thanks, Rakesh. So, see, I feel like a few of the key challenges that we faced during this COVID period, and we will continue to face in maybe immediate post-COVID period, would be the systemic risk which was associated with over dependence on, say, one particular cohort of suppliers. Basically, the interruptions that have come in has posed a lot of risk to our supply chains. And this is primarily because we've not actually included any kind of redundancies into our system. So I feel multi-tier transparency across the supply chain with a certain amount of built-in inventory across, say, these value chains would have helped prevent supply shocks that has kind of happened right now. Though there has been, obviously, like you mentioned, a complete change in the buying, and people have been substituting different types of SKUs. It's more tending towards the guys with the hoarding aspect, and that means that all previous demand planning and all goes to toss, and essentially you'll have to get as close to the last mile, as close to the demand, to understand what exactly is happening in those micro markets, like you mentioned. So I feel like a single geopolitical factor cannot be you cannot create a supply chain where it's completely dependent on a certain region or a certain base of suppliers, wherein uh, they are highly affected by a single geopolitical factor, and we'll have to build in some threshold levels beyond which alternative supplies or supply chains need to be developed. Suspending of these guidance and these forecasts does not help anyone, because the supply chain is all connected. You have different partners, you have suppliers, you have buyers. Uh, Without communicating or collaborating with the partners, it becomes difficult to prevent any kind of supply chain shocks or stress in the system. I think post COVID there will be a shift from this globalization to what is, I guess I can call, localization, where we will focus on securing the local supply, but at the same time we will have to be self-reliant, and we will have to significantly de-risk ourselves. India may have seemed, as I mentioned earlier, as the de facto, beneficiary of all the companies trying to shift away from China and move out of them. But I think a lot needs to be done in terms of, improving the ease of doing business, ensuring the policy changes at grassroots level uh, are done, and the reforms for spurring of investments, because we heard quite a few announcements, but for them to actually make it practical for our ambitions to manifest, it becomes very challenging to get all the necessary incentives in place.
All right, thank you, Akshay. I think that's an interesting take. But given the economies of scale and the kind of dependence that the world has on China, not only as a single country source, but even if you see multiple commodity source or multiple raw material source, it just bounces back to China. Raghav, do you think that this kind of a moving from China to any other country, India, Vietnam, Brazil, as the more, we are spelling it out as if there's the end of China, and there will be a huge movement towards these countries, and there will be a lot of local localization that's happening will lead to localization. What are your takes on that?
I think every country has a role in the supply chain. I mean, it's we ourselves believe that supply chains are and new products especially are going to demand new kinds of supply chains. Whether they will, therefore, the raw materials, where do they reside? Naturally, you have existing source of raw materials, which you will, of course, need to tap for a certain amount of time, but there will be viable alternatives that will also emerge too. And I think that will take time. It's not just going to be overnight. Let's recognize that for sure. And I think this is where, once again, companies who markets are valuing today, and I'm not really talking here about MSMEs here, but actually the listed companies who markets are valuing today are the ones who are actually giving this a far more deeper analytical thought. They've already started thinking about it, but more importantly, they've thought about it even before the crisis. So diversification of raw material source is something that a lot of companies today are doing. And that's, let me tell you, it's not because of China, or it's because of, because, they thought that, oh, let's do it. Actually, the customers are the ones who are demanding it. Because there is a lot of hyper-personalization, for example, which is now really happening at very different levels. And even the poorest of the poor now wants their product, to be far more personalized as compared to what, you was giving them commoditized. And let's not take this exceptional circumstances as a status quo forever, right? I mean, right now it's a very different ballgame. But because now, customers really want things hyper-personalized, naturally the data that comes in from the customer and feeds into from marketing to, R&D to procurement is pushing the procurement guys to really look for far more diversified sources to build that product, rather than, only taking it from one particular source. Why? not because they wanted to diversify, but the customer wants them to diversify. Because the customer believes that this is the raw material from a source called A is not going to give them the end product B. And so therefore they better start looking at sources X, Y, Z to get to that product B, rather than only depending from A. And I think this is the need that is coming up, for diversification of raw material procurement, as well as, procurement of intermediates that is, now being seen across at least large companies in the world. So
All right. Thank you, Raghav. Prashant, I think what Raghav said is very interesting. Hyper personification, but I think the pandemic did not really show that. It was non-personification. That was what was happening. Future is definitely a trend that
hyper personalization, not personification. It's basically
in fact,
personalization.
whatever it is,
No, it is showing actually. Actually, I would beg to differ on that, because what is happening is, if that was not the case, you would not see actually a lot of personalization even happening even during the pandemic. And I'm seeing that because if you look at the data that's coming in for orders of pizzas, for example, people have started ordering far more personalized pizzas during the crisis than before the crisis. And that is interesting only for the reason because people are going through stress. They want to really, kind of order something very personalized to their taste and preferences to alleviate that pain. And that's where personalization becomes so important, even during the crisis.
Right. I did not mean that. I meant in terms of essentials and, large amount of buys that have happened. It has got commoditized. And I think even if you see Kellogg cereals, and I've been doing some interaction with them for a assignment, I see that everything has become so much of a commoditization from personalization. But I think that's a debate that will range on in future, because personalization will definitely catch up when we start reimagining the supply chain post-COVID. Prashant, what is your take on China as a single source? And I would like to add a little more dimensions to this question to you. Is that how has been the mapping being done? I think Deloitte does a lot of this, supply mapping, scenario planning frameworks. How is the mapping being done by these successful, as Raghav rightly said, successful organizations, in order to see that they have been able to become more resilient as compared to organizations which are more into the firefighting and transactional mode?
Let me, Mr. Rakesh, I'll explain that taking the example of a particular sector. In the recent times, we would have seen in the med devices sector, right? We had a shortage of ventilators. If you look at our med device portfolio, even the prime product, 20% of our domestic consumption, or rather, is only manufactured locally. 80% of products which are required for our domestic consumption are imported, and predominantly they come from China as well. So what this has done to the ecosystem in India is, given that we find that we've been being dependent on imports as a large, it could be from any country. It could be from, let's say, med devices coming from Germany, it comes in from China, some of them even from the US. But then we never had an ecosystem for manufacturing in India because only 20% was getting consumed, were getting manufactured for the local market. What we saw was a new set of operating models that were evolving and new ecosystems are evolving. For example, instead of looking at the sector as competition, people started something called co-optation. Multiple companies coming together to ensure that we are able to deliver the product. For example, we have a ventilator manufacturer in India who's based in Bangalore. What happened is other companies who are not related to the sector at all. For example, companies from heavy engineering, companies from the automotive sector, companies which were supplying to engineering products, came together as a consortium and they started manufacturing, setting up an ecosystem for med device companies, which means and there were two reasons for that. they found generally medical devices is a fairly high profitable segment in India. And companies, let's say in the automotive sector, they found this segment lucrative, and they started working with companies rather than looking at them as a competition. So it created an ecosystem. So there was a manufacturing ecosystem in the automotive space which we didn't explore for manufacturing med devices. So now that got it's created a new operating model. The other thing is, it also brought in many design companies. For example, one company had outsourced the open source the ventilator design, which means I will give you the design, I will look at, then you can replicate it and start building the product. So it also meant that it required a company like which was specialized in engineering designs, or someone like the Siemens or someone like the PTCs of the world, coming together, creating an ecosystem which involved someone who specialized in med devices, someone who was another engineering or automotive company, a design company, all of them coming together, and they actually created an ecosystem. Now people are looking at India as an opportunity for building med devices. So I'm just using this as this segment as this sector as an example. What it has created is something which we never explored in the past. It actually found that it was meaningful to be made in the present. So it actually opened up new opportunities. Or I would say, let's say, you look at uh, even, let's say, I'm taking the example of life sciences again, pharmaceuticals. India is the exports almost 20% of the global generics, or supplies to 20 to 30% of the global generics market. And our biggest region is the US. And our portfolio there is cardio or diabetes. But then in the recent times, the portfolio changed. Wherever they needed a lot of anti-malarial and antiretroviral drugs, which means companies who are specifically focusing on those therapeutic areas, they were able to get a huge surge in demand. But then how are they going to manage that demand? And therefore, you found even a lot of portfolio revamps had to be done. But then it also created a new thinking in the manufacturing ecosystem for companies. And what Raghav mentioned earlier, we always build economies of scale, but we never wanted to scale down. It questioned fundamental supply chain concepts like economies of scale and scope. Where you had concentrated manufacturing facilities. Let's say in India, pharma is concentrated in 3 states. It's Gujarat, Maharashtra, and Telangana you put together, which means, and these are also highly COVID impacted states. So supplies are getting disrupted. So it said, should I actually therefore have dispersed manufacturing rather than having a concentrated setup? Which is actually going against the fundamental theory of how do I build in productivity, how do I maximize capacities. So therefore, it started making people think from other dimensions and questioning fundamental aspects.
All right. In fact, then how do you map this risk, supply chain risk? One is obviously these are the network structure for suppliers that exist. How do you map this risk? Because there's a lot of companies which says that we definitely need to map the risk. What is the kind of depth that you need to have into your suppliers framework that would help us to understand the risk better? Whether you are in China or India, that's another debate. But rightly, in China, for instance, you're sourcing a lot of it. You're sourcing from the 3 different zones here in pharma. How are you going to, make it clear your supplies are going to be sustainable?
So two parts to that, Rakesh. One is companies have now started getting into scenario planning. And scenario planning is modeling multiple options for different macroeconomic factors. For example, let's say a scenario could be uh, like what you said, significant sourcing from China. Or another scenario could be, let's say India puts a ban on exports because they might feel there's a shortage of drugs in India. Uh, or the reverse scenario could be China is accelerating manufacturing, therefore giving products at a much uh, cheaper cost. So there could be multiple scenarios that can have an impact. So the idea companies are now doing is, how do I model multiple options for each scenario? For example, what is my supply base looking at? What is the number of preferred suppliers that I have in my existing portfolio? Is there a way, do I need to, I would have a set of active suppliers, but I would have suppliers who are validated in my system, but then I don't use them. So should I now go back to them and get them all into the supplier? Earlier, we used to speak about group buy and get volume discounts. So that may not be the way the future will go. You'll split the share of business across suppliers. So moving from like what I earlier mentioned, you have to move from a cost arbitrage to a disruption arbitrage. Second, even in the portfolio part, now should I have a concentrated portfolio or should I have a diverse portfolio? What's the impact on manufacturing capacities? Uh, so these are multiple scenarios which companies are looking at, and they are modeling it on not only on cost, but they are also modeling on disruption. And the third point is like what Raghav also earlier mentioned, it's about people. See, earlier our business continuity plan was primarily on the network security, having the right firewall, but we have never planned in terms of what if, given social distancing which has come up, if manufacturing plants can work only with 30% of the force, when your capacity utilization goes for a toss, you're not able to produce on time. So we have never been preparing for that. So those are dimensions which companies are now started modeling for and looking at both impact on their revenues, on both on margins, and therefore sustainability in the long term.
Thanks, Antony. I think we will have to move to question and answer as been indicated.
Yeah.
So I'll take the first
Just I would
question
like to just
from.
interrupt at this stage. If we can answer some of the questions, look at this from an investor's perspective, because that would be of relevance to some of the founders in our ecosystem. In your experience, how has the investment in this segment formed up over the last 2 months? Have there been any flags raised by the investors, or has it been a segment that investors have come forward in? From the Mumbai Angels experience, we recently invested in a B2B supply chain logistics player, hyperlocal player, who's actually now also launched a B2C model. And the kind of interest that we got in the deal was something that we had not seen when we had started discussions on the deal. But as we moved towards closure, the interest in the deal suddenly shot up. So have you also seen a similar kind of response? What have you heard in your experience?
Akshay, can you take that?
Yeah, I guess for us, I mean, like, I guess the investors are obviously cautioning their portfolio companies for survival and sustainability. You mentioned that your investment has kind of done a small pivot from and gotten a B2C, arm going. So I guess that is going to be the new normal. I've seen tons of companies that are, have made small pivots in order to so that their metrics can still stay the same, or it can at least pad some of this low demand period, and that is a smart way to go about it if it's in the vicinity of what you're capable and what your technologies and what your strength areas are. But I guess what has been one of the key factors that the investors have always advised is to basically ensure that you preserve your cash. You look at profitability and not growth at all costs. And essentially, they had expectations of having traction that is like pre-COVID levels, unless there is a small pivot or there is a V-shaped recovery, which is not plausible right now. It doesn't seem like it's going to be happening. That's a long shot. So the idea is obviously to conserve cash, reduce the burn, and increase runways. But at the same time, it is about hand holding the portfolio companies like us in order to create uh, create a good enough chance for recovery for the company and for the the ecosystem as such, once this period gets over.
Right. And what is the kind of runway you would advise these startups to plan for? Is it 12 months, 18 months, or is there some kind of number that you could give them, which would ensure that there is a certain degree of business continuity for them?
I mean, it's always good to have as long as the runway as possible. But I guess in times like this, when you don't have clarity as to when can be the next round or something like that, there is and because it's not a really conducive environment for raising of funds, ideally one should aim for like at least 12 months. It could take anywhere between 12 to 18 months. People are saying that last quarter might be a good recovery, like a mechanical rebound, if you hear what the experts are saying. But that still would mean that it's you would at least need a 12 months of runway to be, or even have a chance or a shot at getting back to pre-COVID levels of traction.
Right. And the other question that links into this is that what about some of the cost factors in the business where are there any discussions on rent renegotiation, on employee cost, management? These are some of, I mean, they are common across businesses. This is seen in the supply chain business as well. What are the measures that some of the companies have taken?
One of the things is obviously reduce your variable costs as much as possible. Try and make your teams a little trim. There's a lot of redundancy built in for when you're trying to like factor in for peaks and troughs. But in times like where there is a real demand that is lacking, you you have a lot of, I guess, people with less work, and it's not possible for some companies to keep them on. I'm not saying that's the right way to go or it's a wrong way to go. It's just if common sense has to prevail, one would like go into a survival kind of mode. And there have been players out there that we have seen have taken those decisions to like either trim their workforce or go into furlough some of the employees. Um, get at least a percentage of the salary deduction for a period of few days, or and those are just simple ways that they can extend their runways. Apart from that, they've also tried to like manage their working capital cycles with their vendors. So some of them have tried to like start releasing payments on maybe, I guess, 60 to 80% instead of releasing full payment, so that the it doesn't choke their suppliers, but at the same time uh, they are keeping the cycle flowing.
Right.
Can
And
I just jump in here for a quick
sure,
one?
sure, please. Please.
Because I think what is extremely important, and once again, luckily with speaking to some of the startups, I think one of the key things which I believe is very important is that uh, we are sitting on a lot of information, but each of us within the supply chain, but we are not converting it into an insight. And the reason for that is we all believe if I say something, to dusra kya sochega? If I disclose my reality, what will happen? What will happen to my image?
Right.
These are very real things. And one of the key things which I have seen, people actually gravitating towards now is they literally get everyone on a Zoom call like this one, and start speaking frankly. भैया मेरे पास इतना ही है. This is what I have right now. This is my working capital. This is my cash flow. Can you help me, tide over this right now? If you can help me tide over this right now, let me then see, how I can help you. One of the other things is, can I introduce you to one more client? Very simple conversations like this. Acha, you have something which is in your godown? Fine. I know someone who might be interested in procuring this at this moment. So therefore, it's a quid pro quo. Very practical conversations like this, which can happen over proper video calls, because here you can see expressions, here you can actually feel the human, are helping far more rather than just keeping all this to ourselves. And this is becoming really, really important. I'm seeing people finding real practical solutions on calls when they engage into such conversations.
I think a lot of town halls, these kind of calls have become the norm to try and solve associated business problems. So I think we are kind of running out of time. If we can quickly start with Dr. Singh and then go around the panel in terms of your closing comments and what is the one or two key takeaways that you would want our startup founders to take back with them, which they can implement in their businesses over the next 3 or 4 months, which would help them tide over this time. And given that they're also sitting on an opportunity more than just tiding over, they can actually pivot their business and emerge as winners in the post-COVID world. Dr. Singh, if we can start with your comments. I think Dr. Singh is unmuted. Maybe we can start Raghav with you and then move across the panel while we wait for Dr. Singh to come
I
back.
think this is a real good time to invest and identify actually startups that can collaborate. So as investors, if you can see, because as an investor, if you are able to see, there are 2 or 3 startups that can actually work together well to define a better solution rather than, they working independently. Please start, putting more attention to that. And I'll give you an example. So a very classic example, which I've seen very recently in Europe, was about repurposing of the shop floor. 3 independent startups, each having a solution, which was one, which was far more an engineering solution, one having a design solution, and the third having a very different, kind of a data-driven solution. When this company who was investing in them saw the value and got them together, they were able to create far better value for the client. And I think therefore really looking at, so maybe Mumbai Angels, right? You have an assortment of startups where you're putting your money in. Can you see therefore which ones can collaborate very quickly with each other to give a solution that will be valuable for the economy in the next 6 months? That could be one.
You want me to comment, Shivangi?
Yes, of course.
I think I agree with Raghav, because most of my concern with startups that I mentor is that most of them are enamored by startup ecosystem, but they all operate within their sphere of influence, actually solving a single problem of a supply chain, which is end-to-end solution, and hence may not add that kind of value in the long run. What is also required is that these startups, share a common vision between themselves. They come into a kind of a virtual platforms where collaborating and creating a solution which is connected, planning solution where you can see the last mile and you can see the tire force supplier. In a way, if anyone wants these solutions, is available in conjunction with each other, rather than there's a huge search cost of finding different startups catering to different ecosystem in a way. And I think this is where his collaboration comes into a big way. We need to be really having a network of collaborations which can combine together to provide solution to the companies. The companies are looking for solution. And Indian companies also look at their own sphere of influence and problems, but I think these will change over a period of time. That's my take.
Just a few thought is, especially for startups, is I think one of the challenges that we have also seen is working with startups is the ability to scale up. You will have a solution, but then ability to build scale and take it to a larger layer of customers or portfolio of people. That's why we see most of the startups which struggle with. So I think that's therefore at the same time preserving cash is also a challenge. So in this time, I think the focus would be is to pick your battles and not try to look at spreading thin. But how do you pick your battles and see an opportunity where it helps you scale up gradually, and also I know it will require an investment in the short term, but that's where it's going to help you, because once you have a sticky customer in this current scenario, it helps you build scale as well in the long term.
Akshay, your comment?
Yeah, I feel like both what Rakesh ji and Antony mentioned, what startups have been trying has anyway like to come up with novel business models in this period, right? Now, obviously, as long as these investors are on board with a slight pivot in the business model in order to keep the boat afloat, or in order to cater to the same customers and not lose them because they cannot really engage with you on the particular things that they were doing, whatever that service was, as it was pre-COVID. So then you iterate and you come up with solutions, maybe with the help of some collaboration with your customers, your prime customers, to figure out what you can do for them. I've seen a lot of startups do this. Like some of them who were like only into POS solutions have started doing e-commerce. Some of them have really gotten into last mile as well. Uh, they were not last mile players, but they've all of a sudden pivoted to B2C and gotten into last mile, deliveries. So all of these things are just basically ways and means to enable the stickiness of the customer. Like again, what Antony said, stickiness of the customer, so that once you're out of this period, it's important that you have a good face with a few of them, and the scale which is going to be able to kick in once the demand gets back, because that's all that we have to take care of right now. It's essentially figuring out a way to survive this period and ensure that you're on your foot once this period is done, and you can start running after that.
Great. I think that's wonderful advice for our startup community here. So on behalf of the Mumbai Angels Network, thank you Akshay, Antony, Raghav and Dr. Singh once again for your time. I also thank the audience for their active involvement and the questions that they have sent across, our members for their constant support, and the team at the back for curating the session. I would also like to thank our partners and sponsors, event partner, Ideal Insurance Brokers, taxation partner, TaxContra Global, supply chain and logistics partner, Hedge. Our next sector in focus on the Mumbai Angels Reboot 2 Industry Edition is retail and e-commerce, which is on 22nd May, 11:30 a.m. IST. I look forward to seeing all of you there. Thank you and stay safe. Have a great day. Thank you, panelists.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Stay
Bye.
safe.
Bye.
Bye-bye.